Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I like to discuss Rishi Sunak's speech yesterday, in which he fell back on the usual Tory trick of blaming the most vulnerable people he could find for the failures of his party's destructive and cruel ideology and 14 years in power. Rishi Sunak was attacking a range of people, really, but in reality his main target was those with debilitating mental illness. And if I say, a particular politician has attacked mental illness, a little bit ambiguous. Could mean that they're going to tackle the scourge of mental illness and make sure that more and better treatment is available. But no, Sunak was actually attacking the people with mental illness of being mentally ill. Stop being ill. Well, stop making us ill and let us get treatment when we are ill. No. Before I go over the specifics of what he said, let me just explain the situation in the UK, because there will be people who don't live in the UK who can be surprised by this, or those who do, where it's a little bit out of your experience. So first, the Tories have actually increased the level and seriousness of mental illness directly with their policies. If a person cannot afford a basic standard of living, if they cannot afford decent accommodation, heating and lighting in winter, if they can't afford to eat a nutritionally balanced diet, or even in some cases just the raw calories needed, they become stressed. That stress is also way worse if you're having to provide for others, if you've got children and you can't provide those things for your children. And if you are stressed for a day, I mean, we all get stressed every now and then, something happens, right? But if you're stressed for long periods every day, for weeks, months, or even years, you are going to become seriously mentally ill. Like if someone punches you every day, they come up to you and they smack you in the ribs or the face or whatever, every day, you're going to become injured. Well, the Tories have created a society where people face mental assaults every day. Of course, there are consequences for that. And the second really important thing to consider is when people do become mentally ill, there is no support for the vast majority. Now, there is some provision in the NHS for mental illness. I'm not saying it doesn't exist at all. What I am going to say is this, though, from my own personal experience. In my lifetime, I've known quite a lot of people suffer from clinical depression, into double figures of people, right? And when I say that, I mean a doctor has actually diagnosed them. It's not like we've looked, they look depressed. We're not doctors, right? A doctor has diagnosed them with depression. And for some of these people I've known, it's lasted a few months. For some, it was years. But I have not known a single person be diagnosed with depression and then given treatment on the NHS. As in therapy, as in something that's actually treated it. I've known some be prescribed drugs. They didn't work for a single person I know, and in some cases made things worse. So not only have the Tories actively made the country more mentally ill, but treatment is a matter of postcode lottery. And even then, even if you are lucky you live in the right place, it's a long wait for therapy, like years, and you need a lot of luck involved even for that. And if all that weren't bad enough, the Tories actively try to persuade people that mental illness doesn't even exist. Because it isn't as obviously visible as many physical illnesses, they create room for doubt. Well, how do you know they're depressed? They say they are, but how do you know? They're probably just lazy. Oh, the doctor said they're depressed. Yeah, they just wanted to get rid of them. So they're also then saying, because that's the other thing, the Tories want to stop GPs being able to sign off people as being too ill to work. It's like as if GPs are now fundamentally dishonest. And this has been the attitude of Tories since time immemorial, hasn't it? And it was the message from Sunaks' speech yesterday. He said he's not denying that mental illness is real, and yet spent the rest of the speech basically implying that people with mental illnesses were making it up. For example, one point he said he wanted to look at ways in which people with mental illness unable to work get treatment instead of benefits. Now, anyone who strokes their chin and nodded along with that is an idiot. I'm sorry. First of all, he's just exposed the fact that treatment doesn't currently exist, doesn't he? The point of the NHS is that anyone can get treatment at any time, regardless of circumstances. So how would swapping cash benefits for treatment make any sense unless you're actually admitting that the treatment doesn't currently exist? And given that real treatment does not take the form of waving a magic wand, how are people supposed to live while they receive this mythical treatment? I get that there'll be a lot of people out there who mean no harm to anyone, but serious mental illnesses outside of their lived experience. You know, they've been fortunate enough to have an income and lifestyle which protects them from the pressures which invites mental illness, and the same for everyone they know. And so I also get that it is easier to be fooled into stories of malingerers on benefits than for those of us with more personal experience. But the way Sunak was phrasing things was utterly ridiculous, even if you had no personal experience. It was the classic Tory trick of blaming vulnerable people for their own failures. To the middle classes, they always say, oh, the reason why these things aren't working, the public service is not working very well. It's because of poor people hogging all the resources. And that was his line throughout yesterday's speech. He talked about the sums of money spent on benefits and then compared it to budgets in other departments. And first of all, you could say, yeah, that's because you're not spending enough on the other departments. But also, he didn't talk about how much money is taken out of the system by the real scroungers, the Tory millionaires and billionaires. Lord Ashcroft, for example, popped his head above the parapet a bit recently, who's dodged over £100 million in taxes in the UK alone with his Tory tax breaks, all legal. And there are loads like him who take billions from the Treasury collectively when they never worry about paying the bills. What do they need that money for? What do they need it for? They're just greedy. There was no mention of the sums lost to both tax avoidance and tax evasion, as Labour were talking about the previous week. Speaking of Labour, Keir Starmer had a response for Rishi Sunak as well. He said, if Sunak was so concerned about the cost of so many people being ill, he should be getting the waiting list down. NHS waiting lists are very close to record levels. They reached record levels whilst Sunak was Prime Minister. And about a quarter of the waiting list is for treatment for mental illness, which most are never going to get. And consider that I would imagine, I don't have stats on this, but I would not be surprised to learn that most people in need of mental illness treatment aren't even on the list. Why? Because they don't bother. Because they're not going to get it. Like I said, I've known over a dozen people be diagnosed with depression in my life. I have never known one get treatment. Never one. So most people surely know the chance of ever getting it are remote. And that is one of the most tragic things about healthcare. We have people in need of treatment who aren't just waiting years to get it. That is bad enough. But some have no faith they will ever get it, and so don't push for it. Like, imagine a situation like if you break your arm, you sort of know you're going to get the treatment is very poor these days, but you are going to get treated. They're not going to leave that alone. So you will be part of a waiting list, right? But imagine a situation where actually most people didn't get treatment for a broken arm. So you end up with a lot of people deciding to try and treat it for themselves. I mean, we've seen the similar situation with dentistry. People pulling their own teeth because they can't get a dentist. That is the situation we literally have with mental illness. But the Tories don't care. If this speech has any message at all for people, it should be this. You are economic units to them. The value of a human life is measured by how much money you can make from them. They want you to work as many hours as humanly possible for as little reward as possible. Then once you've expended all your energy, just expire quickly, get out the way. People often quote the Tony Benn statement, how a government treats refugees is instructive because it shows how they treat the rest of us if they got the chance. But this is in fact a very specific form of much older wisdom. The ancient Chinese had a more general version. If you want the measure of a person, observe how they treat someone with no power over them and someone who can do nothing for them. As far as the Tories are concerned, people who are too ill to work definitely do nothing for them because they see value only in their bank balance. Are you driving the businesses that are funding my lifestyle? No, then I don't care about you. If you're not working, you're not powering their investments. But they also don't see them as having power over them either. In theory, we're a democracy, they have their vote. But people struggling with serious illness, especially mental illness or disabilities, are actually less likely to vote. They vote in such small numbers, they're not a threat to the Tories. They don't see these groups as a threat to them. So if you can't work, they see no value in you and they don't see a threat in you. And so that's why they treat these people like they do. You know, and they don't think it's worth funding a decent healthcare system to improve productivity. Just let them starve and focus on the healthy economic units. And that is what they are. And that is what their governments will always work towards. Like, I've now lived through 2 lengthy periods of Conservative government in my lifetime. And yes, I think the current crop are worse than the first lot. But there was a common theme that's ran through both, and that is a relentless focus on selfishness. Like Gordon Gekko's fictional character, his greed is good mantra, fictional. But it is the personification of the Conservative Party. You know, it's often said that if you support the Conservatives, you're either selfish or you've been conned. Check your bank balance to see which one it is. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe for further content and click the like button. You can also sign up for memberships if you'd like to support the channel further. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.